thank you, everybody. It's delightful to be here, and the first thing I'm going to say is I'm from the media, and I'm here to help. The second thing I'm going to say is I'm from Washington, where the definition of a best friend is someone who stabs you in the chest. I'm going to lose the Washington uniform, which is the blue blazer. I'm tucking my cord in here, so it's disgusting and weird. And I'm going to roll my sleeves up because that seems to be warranted with 18 minutes, now 17 minutes and 35 seconds. I'm struck by a couple things I've heard here today, and I want to respond to them and tie them in. One is, things happen by accident, said President Lee Woods. We zig and zag our way through life. And indeed we do, and that's been my experience throughout. I didn't have a grand plan for myself when I was a student here. I didn't have any plan at all. And so when I was graduating and a senior and utterly confused about what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I went to New York City for an interview. And I sat with a guy, and it was 1977. Okay, that's a long time ago. And the idea of a really nice suit in 1977, and I'm not lying, was a three-piece corduroy brown suit. I walked into the room, and I sat with this guy from a very fancy advertising agency who said to me, "What do you want to do when you're 40? And I made the great mistake at an advertising agency of saying, I want to make a contribution, I want to do something creative, and I want to matter. And I want some degree of independence." Well, I didn't get a job offer from a particular advertising agency, and it's a really good thing I didn't. But I ended up marrying somebody who I'm still married to. We're about to celebrate our 30th anniversary. And I met her in Washington, and it turns out she was a Middlebury student too. And it turns out we were in the same class together. And it turns out we actually took a class together. And we never met. We zigged and zagged. And then I couldn't find that job connected with the advertising agency, so I said, I don't know what to do. Well, I did radio at Middlebury College. I kind of enjoyed that. So let me apply for some radio jobs. So I sent out some tapes, and I sent a tape to a guy at a radio station here in Vermont, and I never heard anything back. Meanwhile, I went to the alumni office, and I went through the job office, and I went through the file, and I said, I'm going to find people who went to Middlebury College who own radio stations or TV stations, radio at the time. And I came across this guy's name, well, a name, and I sent him a tape. I didn't realize it was the same guy I'd sent a tape to earlier. And he came back to me after I sent that, and he said, come on over and maybe you'll have a job. And I went over, and he offered me a job. Only he'd lost the earlier tape that I'd sent him. He didn't even make the connection, so I didn't know. He didn't know, but that was my first job. I showed up the first day, and he hadn't bothered to fire the person I was supposed to replace, so he sent me home when I came back the next day. It got a little weird. Things happen by accident. After working there for a while, I applied to this job down in Washington at a place called the Voice of America. It seemed logical. I liked broadcasting, studied a bunch of languages at Middlebury College, studied abroad for a while, thought cultures were cool, thought storytelling was cool. So 400 people applied. I was one of them. I got this job in the internship down in Washington. I went down there, and in about 2 days realized I was going to hate this. This was going to be certain death. I'm so sorry.
There we go.
You're not going to tell me to start all over. I wouldn't do that to you. So I realized this was not going to work, and I thought to bail, and I did, and I got this other job because they now said at a little place called the Associated Press, oh, you speak languages because you went to this college and you worked for an international broadcasting agency for 6 months. You must be really good. What they really were saying was, you're young and you're really cheap. So I got hired. And the guy who was even cheaper, who was in London, who went to a pub midday and never came out of the pub, who worked for them, they made him quit. And then now there was an opening in London. And they posted the opening. And I said, well, I don't know what the heck, I'll apply. I'd been there 6 weeks. But I was cheaper than the guy in London. And the Wire Service Guild, which governed the salaries, said that they couldn't go off and replace him with somebody more expensive, so I was the cheap guy, and I got the job. Zig, zag, accident upon accident upon accident. How many of you have career plans? Know exactly what you want to do? You see one hand. Okay? It's okay. You will zig and zag, and you will have a great time, I promise, if you're open to it. Why is this not working? Okay. I think 4 of the most important words in the English language are once upon a time. Can you say that? Once upon a time?
Once upon a time.
How many of you heard Once Upon a Time when you were a little kid? What's the first story you think about? What's the Once Upon a Time story? Did your parents read to you?
Yeah.
What story?
I guess Connecticut Yankee, just
Oh, okay. Who else remembers a story?
Cinderella.
Cinderella. Who else remembers a story? Which?
Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty. Oh, the Indians in 95. Okay. I think of The Little Engine That Could. Remember The Little Engine That Could? All right? I think of Goodnight Moon. I think of, because I'm dating myself, but I read those stories to my kids, so I'll date them too. It's all in the stories. That's what I've done. I've had the unbelievable pleasure to see stories, to listen to stories, to write stories, and here's what I now realize. I'm in a story. I'm actually in my own story. And I have the capacity to write my own story, just as you all do. Who's that guy? Lech Wałęsa. Who's he? What did he do? Solidarity. I had the unbelievable pleasure of being there in the Gdansk shipyards with this guy before he rose to president, before he threw up, because I, at this ridiculous age of 24, showed up in London for this job that I took over for the drunk. Fortunately, I wasn't drunk, so I remember this. And oddly enough, this was a job for me. I remember showing up in London the first day, standing in the middle of Piccadilly Circus saying, oh my God, I'm here, what do I do? It happened too soon. I didn't even know how to absorb it all. And then I'm traveling and I'm hanging out with a guy who's going to change the world. The wall came down. The wall came down without a drop of blood, partly because of guys like this, who had the courage and the fortitude and the imagination and the creativity to say, it's got to be different. We deserve better. What's this from? Katrina. These are people who had a story. It took a flood of epic biblical proportions, a disaster of unimaginable degrees for them to tell their story. What was their story? We had to slap the media around because suddenly we discovered there's poverty in America again. Suddenly we discovered there are people who, when the disaster strikes, can't get out of town and are going to be stranded on a rooftop. This happens every day. Stephen talked about that. You heard about it. We know about it. But where is our media? We've got so much media out there, so much information out there, we're buried by it, right? But we can't sort through it sometimes to see the story of how many uninsured people there are in this country, how many poor people there are in this country, how quickly the glaciers are melting, not in this country, but around the world because we're absorbed by any other things. How many of you have been on YouTube? I would hope to see every day. How many have you seen, of you have seen the video, Charlie Bit My Finger? Look at all those. Charlie bit my finger. If you go on YouTube and look at the views, do you know how many views there are? 13 million, 150 million. Last I looked, it was over 230 million. But we don't know that this is happening? How is that possible? What's this story? Tiananmen Square. I was White House correspondent during this. I was hanging out with the first President Bush. And this happened, and nobody knew what to make of this. But here's this guy's story. One lone character standing in front of 4 tanks. No, not 4 tanks. An entire system. An entire, unbelievably top-heavy, authoritarian system saying, no, you will not pass. Now, the other part of this story is what happened. They crushed it, didn't they? Tiananmen Square failed. The Chinese system is changing. It's an unbelievable thing. For those of you who've been to China, you know it. For those of you who haven't been to China, go see and experience that story for yourself, because it's the story of our century, I promise you. But this guy had the courage to stand there. The movement was crushed, but the idea and the picture lives on. Because if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then the story behind it magnifies it 1,000 times. Who's that? John F. Kennedy. That picture says so much. These stories go to the top from the bottom. We focus on the top, but every one of us is a story. or should be. How many of you read To Kill a Mockingbird? Everybody. Stories have incredible power to connect and to shake us to our very core. We saw that in the video just a moment ago from an unbelievable storyteller. These stories are not just about the powerful, they're not just about current events, and they are certainly not just about journalism. They are about each one of us who has the capacity, I think, to write, to read, or to be. Anybody know who this is? Who said that? Did I hear a name?
She said Rivers.
Yes. This is a man named Eugene Rivers. I have had the incredible opportunity to but follow guys like Lech Walesa. I've had incredible opportunities to cover several White Houses and watch presidents meet other presidents and prime ministers and shape and change history and sign treaties and spend your money and get you further into debt and launch wars that aren't necessary. But never mind that. I did a story on this guy. This guy is an incredible guy. Grew up in South Philadelphia with the gangs. Broke out of the gangs somehow and got himself to Harvard University, 1963. When he came out of Harvard, which he didn't finish, he had opportunities to go just about anywhere. But he didn't do that. He stayed in troubled Boston, and he started a ministry where he started to minister to people in need, single moms, dropout kids. When I interviewed him, when I found him, his ministry was growing, and he had recently had a terrible thing happen, or nearly a terrible thing. A drive-by shooting. A bullet whizzed in through his young child's bedroom window and lodged 6 inches above that sleeping child's head. So he told a story about how he and his wife went down to the street and they knelt and they prayed. Should they stay or should they leave? Was it worth their lives? Was it worth their child's life? And he decided to stay. And he grew his ministry, and he was providing these incredible services to at-risk kids and young girls, young mothers in particular. So I told that story. I wrote that up. We put that in as a television piece, and I put it on the air. What do you think happened? More attention to that story than any president I had written about. More attention to that story than any summit I had reported from. He starts getting contributions through the mail. I start getting phone calls about how people can get in touch with this guy because people were moved by this story. And what were they moved by? They were moved by his singular courage. They were moved by his determination to stay and to stare risk to his child, square in the eyes, and stay true to his star. And do something that made a difference. That story, that power of story, connected people all over the country to someone they did not know. And they were ready, many of them anyway, to write a check to the guy. It's quite incredible. Subsequently, not because of us, I was at CNN at the time, subsequently he ends up on the cover of Newsweek magazine and has attempted, despite some setbacks, to continue to make a contribution. Stories aren't always easy, though. I was interested in watching the previous video because what I've learned, and I learned this to a large extent after I left CNN, is that stories come in all different shapes and sizes, and that storytelling is now more important than ever because Charlie Bit My Finger gets far more viewers than CNN does. You followed CNN's travails lately with their ratings down 40, 50%. So we have to tell stories better. We have to tell stories in more compelling ways. I worked for 11 months on a way to tell a story about Iran and the nuclear threat. And I developed a scenario, a tabletop exercise, and it was going to be a little bit like 24. And we had people role-playing the president's top advisors, and we put them around a table, and we shot this thing and spent tons of money on it. And 10 days before the broadcast, and it would have been, I'm telling you, it would have been a game changer. 10 days before the broadcast, National Intelligence Estimate came out, this was back in 2007, and they said Iran isn't weaponizing anymore. And the geniuses at CNN said, oh, well, that changes everything. We're going to pull the plug on it. And they never put it on the air. 11 months. And instead they said, well, we'll take your reporting pieces out of it, because I had done that too, and we'll put it in a special, only we're going to give it to somebody else to do the special. And I said, that's really not very nice of you. So they at least let me be in the special so I could take a little cameo. My point is that storytelling zigs and zags too. And things don't always go according to plan. And you do have writer's block, creativity block, superior's block, and you have to deal with that stuff. But I think no matter what, the story prevails. I think no matter what, you get another shot at it. Maybe it's not as brilliant, maybe it takes a different form. I'm not at CNN anymore, now I'm teaching. Now I'm doing this thing called Planet Forward. Now I'm taking advantage of what's in the media because you can tell the stories from the bottom up. They don't all come from the top down anymore. That's what the technology allows. But it's still my bottom line that the story is what matters most, not how you tell it. Who's the character? What's the evolution? What's the conflict? What's your setback? What's your obstacle? What's the point? And I think that's what I would want to leave you with. It's the point of the story. Whether you're Eugene Rivers, or whether you're John Kennedy, or whether you're some lone guy in front of a bunch of tanks, or whether you're some poor person who no one's ever listened to before, or whether you're a hero in the making who can change the world, you have a story. You may not know what it is, but I promise you, you have a story. You're either going to tell a story or you're going to write a story. And it could be a story helping people get the medical care they need, curing cancer, being a great parent, being a great spouse or partner. It doesn't matter. But you're a story. And if you reach out of your story and you pull other people into it and you help folks along the way, you can change things. Maybe you'll change the world. Maybe you'll change a piece of it. Certainly you will change yourself and everybody you touch. So I urge you to be a storyteller. Write the story. Be in the story. Don't worry about these jerks in the media like me, or like I used to be. Maybe I wasn't a jerk. Well, maybe I was. Whether we're jerks or not, it doesn't matter, because the power now exists with you. And through that story, and through that storytelling, others will follow you, others will be inspired by you, and you truly can change things. Like I said, yourself, people you touch, Middlebury College, Middlebury, Vermont, the country, or the world. So good luck. I think the most important words